Let me say this real quick. Uh, Not everything you were taught about growth is true. And some of it just doesn't work in the world we're living in right now. Some of it is just expired. And we're starting with something a lot of people have already quit on. And that is the year itself, 2026. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fuck Your High Vibes podcast. I am Nicole Love, your host, and welcome to today's episode. So today we have a cut through the bullshit episode. And before we cut through the bullshit, I really have a question for you. Have you already decided what kind of year this is going to be? And I mean in the things that you may have stopped trying, in the goals you have maybe stopped looking towards or thinking about or being guided by. And maybe you told yourself you've gotten to the point where yeah, maybe this just isn't my year. Maybe not this year. Because that's how it usually starts. Not with a dramatical experience, not with a breakdown, it literally could be a breakdown, but with this internal resignation. And so this episode is going to be about catching the moment that so many people do not talk about. It's the moment after the excitement wears off, when real life shows up and you start wondering if you already missed your window. And we're not doing resolutions today. We're going to cut through the illusion of them. And we're talking about what actually works when motivation disappears. So if you have already given up on the year, this episode is for you. We're going to cut through the bullshit of it and why you have been failed in some way. And we're going to, as always, I always provide you with opportunities to pivot. We're going to pivot. We're going to have some ways to bring yourself back and refocus yourself if you have felt like you've given up already. Before we go any further, I want to kind of set up what you can expect when we're cut through the bullshit. So I'm going to do these episodes monthly where I pick a topic and kind of cut through the BS around it. And I also want to say it's not about me tearing down things just to be loud. No, I just see that some things are not being presented in a helpful way. I see the harm. I don't see them. They're lacking the full spectrum of the beginning and the middle and the end in helping to really provide a path forward in a way that makes people feel better. I think a lot of times they bypass a lot of things and it's just like really hyped up. And so we're going to talk about that in these cut through the BS episodes. So what this practice actually is, when we talk about New Year's resolutions, we're going to unpack it from what I'm calling resolution culture, what it is actually built on. Because when we look at the surface, like on the surface, resolutions, they sound harmless and even hopeful, right? I can agree to that. On the surface, it looks that way. But underneath, there's a few assumptions that quietly set people up to fail. So I want to go through those assumptions here. One assumption is that a calendar flip equals this fresh start. And so resolution culture teaches us that January 1st has some kind of magical reset button. Like the moment this clock hits midnight, your habits and your history, your nervous system and circumstances all just clear, right? But real life, it doesn't work that way because your body doesn't know it's January. Your stress didn't expire with the old year. No. And your patterns, they didn't disappear because the calendar changed to a new year. And I want to say that a new date can mark intention. What is missing here in me cutting through the bullshit is that it doesn't create capacity. We have to have the capacity in order for things in our life to change. And we'll talk about what that looks like in real tangible form here. So the assumption that sets people up to fail here is that people believe the calendar itself is doing the heavy lifting because there's this unpreparedness for the moment when real life shows up exactly the same on January 2nd. And when it does, they assume something's wrong with them rather than questioning the idea that a date alone could change anything. So that's one assumption. The second assumption I want to talk about is that motivation equals readiness. This is a huge one. This idea of motivation, I feel like that alone can be an entire cutting through the bullshit episode. But for today's purpose, we're going to kind of water it down a little bit. We're going to make it, not water it down, we're going to make it more concise here. There's this lie that if I feel motivated, that means I'm ready. Here's the thing about motivation. Motivation is emotional. It's reactive. It spikes when things feel hopeful or painful or inspiring. Think of watching motivational videos. They just like, they tug at your heartstrings. They're like, oh my God, that's so amazing. And like, I want to do that, right? Because motivation is emotional. Readiness, on the other hand, is structural. So the assumption that set people up for failure with this resolution culture around motivation equals readiness is that motivation is emotional and readiness is structural. But emotions are not. There's a conflict. Do you see the conflict? You have something that's unsteady that is the equivalent to something that is structural. There's an imbalance. So you can want something deeply and still not have it. You see the difference? The emotions and the structure. So you can want the time and the energy, the support. Maybe you want the nervous system capacity. And the thing about resolution culture here is that it confuses this excitement for preparedness. And that assumption is what sets you up to fail. And you have people that make these big promises during these emotional highs without checking whether their life can actually hold what they're committing to. That structure, that readiness requires. I'm motivated to do the thing, Do you have the structure in place that can support you? That's the setup there. That's the setup for failure. And when that motivation fades, because it always fades, they interpret that as failure instead of recognizing that they built the plan on a mood. Because it is failure. That you failed because there was a lack of building a solid structure. And then the last one I want to talk about, the assumptions here that resolution culture really kind of pushes, that really sets people up to fail, is wanting something badly enough equals being able to sustain it. And this one is really sneaky, that you want something bad enough, you'll be able to sustain it. And so resolution culture, it pushes the idea that desire equals discipline, right? That if you really want something, you'll just make it happen. I really want this, I'm going to make it happen. But wanting is not the same as having capacity. Because you can want better health and more peace and consistency and change, and still be exhausted, still be grieving, still be stretched thin, still be navigating a world that is demanding more than ever from you and of you. So sustainability doesn't come from wanting harder. It comes from building systems that support you when wanting isn't enough. So this assumption that if I want it bad enough, I'll be able to achieve it. That assumption, the failure is there. Because people can't sustain a resolution if they don't. You have to question the structure. And what's happening is, oh, I didn't want it bad enough, and that's why I wasn't able to achieve it. And so what happens is that you start to question your worth and your willpower and your character. And that's where the damage happens. That's where it happens. So those are the three assumptions that resolution culture really does push, and the failure is right there clearly, because you have, the calendar starts at, a new calendar year means everything is clear. I can leave everything in the past year because it's a new year. No. Do you see? You see where the failure is there? That's not true. Motivation equals readiness. Motivation is very much emotions, and emotions are moving, and like literally emotions are energy in motion. They're always moving and changing and what have you. And readiness requires the structure. There's a conflict, essentially. It's not true. It's about having the appropriate system in place and wanting something bad enough, I'll be able to sustain it. And so this assumption, it harms people, because then they start to, all of these assumptions harm you, because then you think there's something wrong with you. Like, why can't I figure it out? And so you start to look at failure as something that is you want to avoid failure at all costs. And then what happens is people they stop making plans for their life. They stop making goals. They still do the resolutions because it feels shiny and new and like, oh, everybody's doing it and what have you, but it just doesn't last. I want to talk a little bit about how it got watered down here. I'm going to provide some stats and reality here. And I want to talk about the letdown effect that I kind of mentioned earlier. I think I did. But if not, we're going to mention it now. So let's bring in some facts here because I feel like they confirm what most people already feel, what you may already be feeling when it comes to like resolution culture. It really is hyped, it's emotional, and not built for real life. I think we can already say like, okay, yes to those things. So most people, they set the goals, but few of them stick. And this is super interesting when I saw this, and I saw this in several places, but a large portion of adults that set New Year's resolutions, but of those who set those New Year's resolutions, only about 9% follow through for the entire year. 9%, only 9% of people who set resolutions at the start of January, only 9% have followed through by the end of the year. And that doesn't mean that desire isn't, it does. So that means that desire is not the issue. Okay. I think we can agree to that. That wanting change is not the issue. It's the structure. I think we've already proven that you have to have a structure in place that equates for our humanness. And that's where the watering down starts. That's 9%. Only 9% follow through from the beginning to the end of the year of 100% of people, most people, when they set these New Year's resolutions. And when we think of how resolutions are marketed as motivational and exciting and almost glamorous, well, a new year of a fresh start, a chance to reinvent yourself, right? But that hype is emotional sugar. It's emotional sugar. And that emotional sugar, it sets people up for what's called the letdown effect. The thrill fades, life shows up, and suddenly all that momentum, that emotional sugar, that hype of, yeah, new year, yeah, it collapses. It just collapses. And this happens in real life all the times in all areas of life. It happens after a wedding. You know, the adrenaline wears off and reality shows up. I mean, a new baby. That's another one that a lot of people don't talk about in so many ways, because there's a lot of shame of like, well, why are you let down that you have this new little one? It's like, you should be ashamed of yourself. But this letdown effect is real because the adrenaline, the come down from the adrenaline, that high, it hits you. And anyone that's like gone through like a sugar detox, it sucks. That's adrenaline. That's that adrenaline high that's coming down. And this is one that's really, I feel like a lot of people can relate to this. You know, after you move into a new home, like the excitement of the fresh start, it is met with bills, boxes, maybe things that need to be fixed that were working before you moved in, right? And it's the same with resolutions. This letdown effect is the same when it comes to resolutions, because it's like that it's hyped with that emotional sugar. The idea was exciting and shiny and simple, but the follow through, it struggles to match the hype. And when it doesn't, people start to internalize failure instead of recognizing the system was flawed from the start. So leaning a little bit more into the stats here, and I'll stop talking about the numbers here of how it got watered down, New Year's resolutions. The research confirms this letdown effect. And it says here, the research says that 23% quit within the first week. The first week, that letdown effect is real. You can't tell me that letdown effect is not prevalent in that 23%. Within the first week, 7 days. 7 days. Quit within the first 7 days of the new year. And then we have, by the end of January, nearly 64% have given up. That's that letdown effect that I'm talking about. Coming off of that sugar high, that emotional sugar high, the hype of, ooh, yeah, the excitement and that motivation that's like speaking to the emotional part of you. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It just lacks the structure and the systems needed in order to achieve that goal or those goals. And then I also wrote here in my notes, there's a moment that's called Quitter's Day. I think it's like the third or fourth. I think it's like the third or the second Thursday of the month. That's called Quitter's Day, when this mass abandonment happens. Quitter's Day. They have a name. They actually have a day for this. So why I want to share how it got watered down, I want to show you this. I wanted to share the stats and the reality and this letdown effect, essentially, that you're experiencing, is so that if you're feeling disconnected or behind or maybe disillusioned, it's not just failure. That's pattern. And patterns tell us more about the system than the person inside. And as someone who works with pattern recognition in helping, my clients identify the challenges that they're experiencing and seeing what are the patterns that are playing out, it can be empowering in like, oh, okay. It's not because I can't make it happen. It's not because I'm broken, essentially. So failure is there. Failure is not something that means there's something wrong with you. Failure happens all the time. Failure provides us with opportunity to look and reflect, and see, to find the patterns and go from there. I think we should do a mid-episode check-in. Let's do it. All right. Real quick, I want to pause us right here for a mid-episode check-in. Just kind of breathing and kind of noticing the information that I'm sharing here. And I want to provide an opportunity of just checking in here. So if there's anything in this episode that may be poking at something uncomfortable, or maybe you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. Notice it. Notice it. And also, you don't need to fix it. You don't need to act on it yet, right? We're just noticing it. We're just cutting through the bullshit. We are looking for the patterns here. And in order to look at the patterns, we have to look and see what's working and what's not working. That's how you find the patterns. And this is also one of those episodes where you take what resonates for you and you leave the rest. Because discernment is the practice, right? We're all about discernment. So if you're listening and you're thinking this does not apply to me right now, that's okay too. Because sometimes clarity isn't about urgency, it's about information that you may need later. So stay with me, no pressure, no performance, just awareness. All right, let's keep going. And we're going to get into why it all matters and how you can actually make those changes, build that structure for a more fulfilled and love of life. Right. So I feel like I've gone into a little bit of why it can become harmful, but I really want to go there. Why I feel resolution culture is harmful. This isn't a motivation problem. I think we can agree that it's not a motivation problem. It's a design problem, right? Because motivation is a mood, it's not a plan. So motivation, again, is emotional. So you can say it's a vibe, and vibes change. Life didn't pause because the year changed, right? Your nervous system, it didn't reset at midnight. Bills still came. Your body still needed rest, and motivation, it cannot carry you through real life. And the harm of that a lot of times is that we set resolutions that don't match reality, or we set resolutions where they're vague as hell. Like, I want to be healthy. I want to get my life together. I want to be more disciplined. So when life shows up, reality shows up, and they like, be healthy, get my life together, be more disciplined, become a challenge where the goal does not match the reality, there's this assumption that they're the problem. Where the issue was that the goal was unrealistic. It becomes harmful because there's this myth also too of instant change. Resolution culture, it really does sell this fantasy that change is fast and clean all at once. But real change is slow and can be inconsistent and uncomfortable. And so when results don't show up immediately, people start to think that they failed versus, oh, this takes time. So this myth of instant change is a lie, because change is slow, uncomfortable, and can be inconsistent. There's also this mindset of all or nothing thinking that can become very harmful too. I see this kind of pushed as well. So it's you're either on track or off the wagon. You're disciplined or you're a mess. You're perfect or ruined. And that mindset, it kills momentum. And momentum is crucial for change. Building momentum bit by bit, it propels you forward on the days where you lack motivation. So one missed day can become, well, why bother? And if you have a hard week, it can say, well, this year, maybe you're like, well, you know what? This year is already ruined, and you may default, why bother? And none of that is true. No. So what actually works? How do we engage with what we are talking about? Let's talk about what works in real life and takes into consideration when you may be tired and already doing your best. It's all about meeting yourself where you are. So one approach is, instead of fixing everything, choose one thing to return to. So say you missed a workout, you may have stopped journaling, ate differently than planned, right? Come back to those. come back. Missed a workout, come back. You stop journaling, come back. You ate off plan, come back. Because that's the skill. The skill of learning to come back, always come back, to not give up on yourself here. That's the skill that you're learning and you're cultivating. You're building the capacity to come back and come back and come back. And the more you come back, that capacity, it grows and it grows and it grows. Goes back to change is slow and it can be inconsistent. But capacity, it's about building capacity. So doing less on purpose. And what actually works, another thing that actually works is to not make quitting mean anything about you. And this kind of bleeds into doing less on purpose. So not making quitting mean anything about you. It's about stopping something does not mean that you're lazy. It means that the goal didn't fit. Maybe the timing was off, right? Maybe you needed support or rest. And so this quitting something is feedback. It's not failure. It's not failure. It's not saying, okay, let's just stop trying. It's feedback. And maybe, so say it bleeds into this first one, maybe there's a need to do less on purpose. So going back to like you missed a workout here or you stopped journaling, you ate differently than planned. Maybe the goal doesn't fit because it doesn't honor your time. It doesn't honor your capacity. It doesn't honor maybe you realizing that you may need more rest. Maybe you need more support. So maybe you missed a workout and you quit. The feedback here, how can I come back in a way that honors the time that I had, that honors where you are? So if you go from a previous year of not working out at all, and you go into setting the goal of working out 7 days a week for an hour a day, is that a realistic goal? Is it a realistic goal? Are you setting the goal so big that you can't carry the capacity of doing that because you don't know how? You've never done it before on that large of a scale. So how can you meet yourself in looking at the feedback, looking at the failure as a pattern of like, okay, let's be real here. Let's be real. Why do I feel like I need to work out an hour a day? Where is that coming from? Start there. That's one thing to work on. And then from that, what's realistic? What can you do that you can be consistent at doing? And maybe it's working out 10 minutes a day, like 7 days a week. Maybe it's working out 3 days a week. Maybe it makes more sense. If you're like 10 minutes, that doesn't do anything. Okay, well, maybe for you, you're like, oh, I have time to do like 30 minutes, but maybe only 2 times a week or 3 times a week. So it's coming back to it in a way where you play with the timing, you play with fitting the goal into your life, because it's about coming back that you build the capacity. Because a lot of times what happens is you do the 5-minute workouts and then you're like, oh, this is kind of fun. And you you expand your capacity a lot of times within that 5-minute time frame, and you end up doing like 10 minutes. But then when you have days where, like 5 minutes is a lot, but you showed up and you did the 5 minutes, you still came back and you're still building capacity. You're building change and you're building momentum by consistently showing up. That's why it's so important of setting goals that make sense for your life, setting goals that make sense for you, setting goals that aren't based on how people are telling you you need to be or you should be in practice, in working out and in journaling. And so journaling, maybe it's like, maybe you stop journaling because you set the goal of journaling in the morning and the night and you weren't journaling at all. Maybe realistically once a day, maybe realistically once a week, maybe realistically once a month, once a quarter. Come back to it. Maybe you journal, you set a timer for 5 minutes. Set my my timer for 5 minutes, and I sit down and I journal. And a lot of times what happens when you start small, you expand your capacity. And a lot of times when you, especially with journaling, you set a timer for 5 minutes and it's like, oh, I can go longer. You're expanding the capacity and you're showing up and you're building that momentum. And over time, you may have started with journaling 5 minutes a day and you may be up to an hour. I journal an hour once a week on Sundays. And I've done it consistently for 5-6 months, but maybe you have built it up to get to that point. And this is another approach here of how to engage with setting goals here is letting good enough count. Because a lot of times we get in our head of, oh, it needs to be more. It needs to be more. The number needs to be higher. So letting good enough count, asking yourself, what is the easiest version of this I can do today? Because halfway counts. Messy counts. Showing up tired still counts because you come back. You keep showing up. You're showing up in a realistic way. You're meeting yourself where you are in real life. And how can you plan for the days you're over it? Because if your plan only works on good days, it's not a plan. It's a plan. It's a plan. It's a plan that will likely set you up for failure. So this plan, how can you plan for the days when you're over it, is to ask yourself, what's my bare minimum? What's my reset look like when I don't care? How do I re-enter without guilt? How do I come back without guilt? So it's really about building those systems. It's about building the systems here. That's what I'm talking about, the need for systems to exist when your motivation ebbs and flows. If you have the system and you have the system in place where you come back, you'll show up when your motivation is not there. And because you have the system in place to come back, that can essentially motivate you to keep going. That's how you come back. That's how you show up when life, you just don't have the capacity, when you lack motivation. And then we have this last one before we close out here. And this is choosing progress that you can live with. I kind of touched about this briefly here. And I think this is really, really crucial. If growth requires a level of shame and pressure, or essentially self-betrayal, it's not going to last. It's not going to last. The thing about change, in order for it to be sustainable, is quieter, because change is slow. It can be seemingly inconsistent at times because we are emotional beings. And because we're emotional beings, that means motivation is going to lack some days. There's a need for a level of kindness and compassion and understanding that we are humans, and allowing for our humanness to exist and to not tear ourselves apart because we're humans. How dare I lack the motivation to do the things that I really desire? Why are we saying these things to ourselves? Why are you saying that to yourself? Because we do feel life happens. There's moments when things and experiences happen and we don't have the motivation to show up maybe 100%. But how can you come back? Maybe it's like, I don't have 100% right now, but I can give 10%. And you still come back because you show up for yourself. It's all about showing up for yourself. How can you come back and show up for yourself over and over and over again? And it's about choosing progress that you can live with. That makes sense for you. Going back to those workouts. Who says you need to work out an hour 7 days a week? Maybe where you are in your life right now that you can live with, because at least you are working out, you are moving your body. Maybe it's 10 minutes a day. Maybe it's 15 minutes a day. Maybe it's 30 minutes a day. Maybe it's not an hour. Maybe it's 30 minutes a day. Maybe it's finding ways to add in being more active in doing the day-to-day things that you're doing. Maybe it's parking further away from the front door of the building that you are going towards. Maybe it's taking the stairs versus the elevator. Maybe it's walking up and down all the aisles in the grocery store since you're there. So it's choosing progress that you can live with. Maybe it's finding a walking group that you can join. Those are really, really huge, because there's always people that tend to kind of show up, and you'll notice there'll be some people that are there all the time. You'll notice some people that come and go, right? But at least the walking group is there and you can show up. So maybe being in a community with people who are choosing progress that they can live with. Finding systems in place that make sense for you, that you can live with. So as we close out here, I want you to ask yourself, where did you already give up this year? Where did I already give up this year? You already there? Are you part of that 63%? No judgment here. And without that judgment, I want you to ask yourself, what were you expecting from yourself that wasn't fair? What resolutions, what New Year's resolutions did you set that you now realize, oh, I set a resolution that set me up for failure? And that's okay, because now I recognize the pattern and I can choose to honor choosing progress that you can live with, that makes sense for you around building the system and the structure you need in order to achieve that goal, that resolution that you set. So choose one thing to return to. Come back. Remember, you want to come back. Choose the one thing and come back to that. Make the adjustment needs. Choose the one thing to return to, not later. Do it now. Come back to it now. And before I sign off here, I want you to hear this clearly, that if you have already felt yourself pull back this year, that doesn't mean that you have failed to the point of no return. It means that you may have noticed something was not working. And this episode, it was not about convincing you to try harder. It's about reminding you that not everything you were taught about growth is true. And some of it simply doesn't fit the world we're living in right now. And resolution culture specifically, it tells you that quitting means something about you. And discernment, because that's the theme of the year, the energy of the year that can help support you to move through this year in alignment for you specifically. It asks a different question. It asks a different question about resolutions. It asks what didn't fit, what was unrealistic, and it also asks what needs adjusting. And that shift right there is where real change begins. And you don't need this drastic restart. You don't need a new identity. No, you don't need to declare anything to prove you're serious. What's needed are practices that meet you where you are, structures and systems that support you on hard days, because that's a part of life. That's a reality of life. And you need the permission to return with no shame. So this is the work of discernment that I talked about this year. It's not about believing louder. It's not about committing harder. It's choosing what actually supports you and letting the rest fall away. And we're just getting started this year. We're just getting started. The year has just started. Now is always the time to come back. Now is the time to always come back. So that's it for now. If this episode helped you see something more clearly, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that being messy and real and human is the point, not the problem. So go live like you mean it, okay? Go live your fucking life like you mean it for yourself, without the head games, without the pressure to get it perfect. Always knowing that you can come back. And hopefully I'll see you in the next episode. This is Fuck Your High Vibes. I'm Nicole Love. And remember, if this shook you, good. Now do something with it. Fuck the illusion. Embrace the truth. I'll let it be.